that goes into it. And my goal is to obviously help as many people as I can. We could do go over different types of iris analyses, things of that nature. We could really have some fun with it. But yeah, so we'll get you in there. Anyway, okay, we're back here on YouTube. We're still on Instagram. So I apologize. Something goes on with my mic every so often on YouTube. It might be the cord that's connected to my computer. I might need to get a new USB plug, but we'll see. So sitting is the new smoking. Listen, any type of movement's going to be helpful. I know I went over that before it got cut off, so I'm not going to jump into that again. Some other benefits. So what we know is with working out, with exercise, that you can actually create new blood vessels in the brain. So this is going to actually increase blood supply to the brain, which is already really cool because the brain is going to use up like 90% of the body's oxygen and about a quarter of its glucose, which is our main form of energy that we use as human beings. So really important. Like one of the biggest benefits of movement is the fact that we can actually help improve and increase the amount of blood flow to the brain, which is really important because again, it is such an oxygen demanding organ in the body. So pretty crazy for something that's only a few pounds to take up such a high percentage of all the oxygen we use. Another thing, so we talked a little bit about blood sugar earlier. So did you know actually 1 pound of muscle requires 6 calories per day to maintain, and a pound of fat only requires around 2? So just having more lean muscle compared to fat tissue on your frame, you're going to burn more calories because muscle is just metabolically more demanding to keep up. So even if you sat there and did nothing all day, if you have muscle on your frame, you're going to be metabolically more demanding than someone who doesn't. So that's actually a really cool, like neat little benefit and another reason why it's really important. We talked a little bit about cravings is a big one too. So, it actually helps modulate and optimize the release of things like ghrelin and leptin, which are hunger and satiety hormones. So really important there. With the release of endorphins, this is going to help manage and mitigate stress. When you're exercising or doing yoga or something where you need to concentrate, that's going to put you in the now moment. And one of the big issues when we're talking about stress, and remember, the reason not 80 to 90% of all doctors visits are stress related, you have to remember, a lot of that comes from either thinking about the past or worrying about the future. And if we actually live in the present, we realize a lot of this stuff just kind of melts away. So that's another huge, huge thing. Now, why has this become so difficult? Well, it's not too hard. I mean, I'm sitting at a desk right now doing this talk, which, obviously I like to practice what I preach, but it's tough for me to kind of obviously run around and give this demonstration here. But maybe we could talk about that in the membership, show exercise, do exercises and stuff like that as far as rehab and stuff, but down the road. Older previous generations of human beings just had a variety of low intensity, moderate intensity, and high intensity exercises just built into their lives, whether it was, building or running or jumping or dancing, just as part of, just cultural norms, just walking all the time. It's estimated that some earlier, humans were just walking 10 miles a day. Mothers would carry babies, you know, 8 to 10 miles a day, and this was just something they did every day. So, it was just part of their lives. Now, unfortunately, now we're now generally speaking so deconditioned that if you look at the American College of Sports Medicine, what they actually recommend today as far as the exercise that humans should get is roughly 44% less than the average hunter-gatherer would have gotten. Again, according to our estimates. But that's what they recommend. And it's 44% less than just what the average human was getting thousands of years ago, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. So not only are we underdoing it by our own standards, we're underdoing it compared to the generations that have come before us. And if we don't get on top of this now, it's going to lead to a lot of different issues. Nowadays, it becomes so much more difficult because we tend to live, and listen, I'm from New York City. I get it. Like everyone wants to go, always, in that high stress sympathetic state. You're always moving from one thing to the next, and we all complain about time. Well, the thing is, like, if you don't actually make it a priority, it's going to go right by you. So whether you have to schedule it out, whether it's getting your sleep set right so that you can get into a place where you can do this, whether it is, carving out the time where you put your phone on airplane mode and you set it in the corner and it's far away and you get what you have to do done, whatever it is, whatever motivates you, get down there and actually do it. Because if you're not getting into it, it's going to be a long road as far as your healing is concerned. Lymphatic stagnation, we've been talking about that a lot the past few weeks. That is primarily due to a lack of movement. That is the primary mover of lymph, is movement. If we are not moving, it shouldn't be a surprise why things like cellulitis or edema or skin issues of any kind, these are all lymphatic type issues. Movement is the key. We could talk about herbs like echinacea or cleavers or red clover or astragalus, and these are all going to be really helpful. But if you're not moving daily, in my opinion, we're going to run into problems. And that has to be the foundation. It is non-negotiable if you're talking on your healing journey. You have to move whatever you can. And if it's hard where you're at now, do what you can now. Start with deep breathing exercises. That is, if it's walking, if it's swinging your legs because you're in a wheelchair for some reason, if it's swinging your arms, if it's as minimal as it needs to be, it has to be something. Has to. Bonus, absolute bonus if you can do it outside or with some sunlight, ideally not through a window. I know I have it come through a window now, but ideally with some exposure to the sun, that's going to make it, that much more beneficial because again, that's going to help regulate our circadian rhythm. If we did it barefoot, for example, that would, or like on the beach, when I was living near the beach, I would actually do workouts barefoot on the beach. Huge. You get the benefits of grounding too. And I would do it in the morning when the sun's coming up. So, you try to stack those little things if you can. Obviously, if you can't, you do the best you can in your situation. Now, the question is where you start. Now, if you've been in someone, they can actually put together programs that are appropriate for your fitness level. Now the goal of what we're going to talk about here is going to be, what does a good program kind of look like when you're ready and able, and then how to kind of build up to it. So, it could start, and most docs will say, hey, just start with walking. And I think that's a great place to start. I honestly do. But at some point, you're going to have to, build that up. And ironically, the busier you are, the more of a stress type lifestyle you live, you actually need to be exercising more because that's actually going to help make you more efficient and then less busy in the long run. It's kind of a catch 22, but that is how it works. If you break that down, it will work. Now, when I am thinking of a program or how I put this stuff together, there are four main pillars. It's muscle strengthening, so strength, aerobic activity, flexibility and mobility, and then timing is the fourth. So you have to cover all four of those pillars in some way, and there's plenty of ways to do that. Now, muscle strengthening is pretty straightforward. It's weight bearing exercises. It could be body weight. It doesn't necessarily have to be weight bearing as far as holding on to weights. Now, that's nice to have, but calisthenic type movements can be really helpful too. Now, aside from the aesthetic reasons of strength training, there are metabolic advantages like we talked about. It's three times more, you need three times the amount of energy to sustain muscle tissue as you do fat tissue. So that's huge. So the more muscle you have, the more calories your body will burn, even if you're sitting in your bed all day. What's also really huge is, and this is really big for the ladies out there, and this is something that, I get looked at like I have five heads, but further on, if you're struggling with blood sugar or PCOS type symptoms or endometriosis or cysts of that kind, usually they're blood sugar related to some degree, but also PMS type symptoms, period pains. all of these, when you start actually exercising, especially doing incorporating some strength training, you will not believe how quickly some of these symptoms will clear up. And it's funny, like after like you get into it after a few months, I'll start getting responses like, "Oh, you were right. I kind of slacked off a little bit this month and those pains came back." It's almost like a way to check your temperature almost. Like it kind of is. It's it's really incredible like how important. I can't overstate like how important strength training is. And you don't have to become a gladiator. And for, the ladies out there who are always worried about, looking like um, someone who's in like the competitions, the majority of those people, believe me, that are on steroids to some degree. You do not look like that as far as those bodybuilding type builds without the use of usually some sort of performance enhancing material. Now, listen, is it possible? Yes, but the lengths you have to go to are incredible. And you will look look at most female athletes. They do not look like that. They just don't. They just look athletic. And that is why strength training is so important. So if we can get it in, listen, there's so many different types: running, hiking, like I said, free weights, jumping rope, climbing stairs, resistance bands, calisthenics, certain forms of Pilates and yoga can really do it. Anything that's going to perform against gravity can count as strength training. So gotta include that to some degree. Number two is aerobic activity. Now, everyone's heard of this. It's running, but again, it can include jumping rope, biking, sprinting, dancing, cross country skiing. There's plenty of different things, and technically, it's defined as something that uses large muscle groups performed continuously in a rhythmic pattern. Now, also really important, yes, water rowing, crew, also a great option as far as that goes. That for strength and aerobic. Now, really important for cardiovascular tone. The thing with aerobic activity is you have to get to a point where you're willing to switch things up, either the intensity or the duration, because you will reach a potential plateau. And that will be things that are going to be that is going to prevent your growth. So you have to be willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. Eventually, you're going to reach points where you need to increase the intensity or increase the duration. And you'll know when you get there, you'll start feeling it. Maybe you're tracking your progress, either writing it down or, tracking yourself on runs, whatever it is. But it has to be something that you're including, at least in my opinion, one to two times a week. Now you can put multiple different types of steps of these into different workouts, but yet we're just going over the pillars here. Now, flexibility and mobility is super important, especially for anyone who works a desk job or is a student or is just kind of sitting around all the time, because our goal should be when we're hitting our 70s and 80s and 90s, we have to have full range of motion in all of our joints, because and ideally it's pain free. And unfortunately, just the way we live our lives now, we actually have to work at that. It's going to help prevent injuries. It's going to keep you more limber. It's going to keep you more pain free. So, some form of flexibility or mobility training absolutely has to be part of it. And again, it could include things like yoga, it could include Pilates, it could include different types of mobility work. I used to teach functional movement screens. So those are a great way if you're looking for a test, and you can look it up. It's 7 different exercises that you can test to kind of see where your mobility is at. They'll make you do a squat, a push up, a lunge, a few other things. So you kind of check where you're at. But having some sort of flexibility and mobility is really important. It's going to help strengthen the tendons and ligaments. It's going to help also reduce stress levels, especially if you're talking about different types of yoga. Now, when stretching and doing mobile work, you want to work to the point of tension, but not through pain. So you also don't want to bounce. So some folks will bounce at the end range, and that's not going to help improve lengthening. Ideally, you want to breathe through whatever the movement is too. So you don't necessarily want to just, sit there and, bounce at end range and be like, oh, I'm going back and forth. And that, no, you want to hold it. You want to breathe through it to the point of pain, not necessarily through it. And you could even back off a little bit and get through that. And over time, that's going to improve. Now, the fourth thing is timing. And I will say this, and this is the thing that most people I think shrug at or give me the side is like you have to, even if it's a short amount of time, you have to fit it in on a daily basis, and ideally on days that you actually work. Now, why is that? You can try to do the weekend warrior thing or work out on just Saturdays and Sundays or Fridays and Saturdays or whatever it is. But inevitably, what's going to happen is someone's birthday party is going to come up, or someone else's family, engagement is going to come up, or some other thing that's going to take your weekend away. You're going to go away for a trip, and those days are gone. So you have to, even if it's a shorter amount of time, even if we're talking 10, 15 minutes, it has to become part of your daily routine, especially on the days that you're working. Um, if you're doing it sporadically, you're going to get sporadic results. It has to be something that we're consistently working at on a daily basis. And if it's broken up into shorter amount of times, you can do it. I find, and research seems to back this up, if you can get these workouts in the morning, if you have that time, you tend to be more likely to stick with it long term versus those who do it in the afternoon or in the evening. So based on at least the research, I could say this from my own experience. I find if you can get into the routine in the morning, you're more likely to stay consistent with it over the long term. You can try it yourself, but that's kind of where I'm at and where I come from with it. Now, it's also important to understand that the body doesn't necessarily look at movements as single muscles moving. In other words, if I move my arm up like this, yes, the biceps moving because that moves my shoulder up, but there are plenty of other muscles that are going to lift my shoulder as well. And they don't look at it as like, oh, fire the biceps, oh, fire this other muscle, oh, fire this muscle. No, that's not how it works. It's just this is the movement pattern. So it's a quality type of movement. This is where something like a functional movement screen is really important because it looks at the integrated units of multiple different muscle groups firing at the same time. Do they allow for proper movement, proper mobility, ideally in a pain-free range of motion? Are you moving as an integrated unit? And those are the basic, fundamental movement patterns that you would find again in a functional movement screening. So again, squats, lunge, it's a push, it's a pull, it's a bend, a twist, and then walking. So those are the 7 basic movement patterns. And again, functional movement screens are something that I like to use, and something that you can use to kind of gauge where you're at. So when you're putting together a plan, it's more important to focus on the quality of movements more so than the intensity right away, especially if you know these movement patterns are a little bit off. And this is why it's really worthwhile to work with someone who can at least tell you where you're at. And if you do work with someone to tell you where you're at, then you know where the point your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can make the resulting changes that you need to. And if you're just reinforcing poor mechanics, it's only going to actually increase your chance of injury. It might limit your range of motion, and it's going to lead to bigger issues down the road. So making sure that you're getting proper movement uh, patterns, you're having proper movement patterns, and someone even coaching you through it. Really, really important. It's almost like if you look at computer hardware versus software. Now, the software is the neurology of the body, and the computer is the muscles, the joints, and the ligaments that move. So if our software is not in line with our hardware, then there could be some dysfunctional movement. It could lead to potential issues down the road. So again, we want to focus on quality movements, making sure that we're doing everything right, making sure these movement programs, so to speak, are on as much as we could. Now, as far as getting started, the best place to get started, in my opinion, is start with something you like. What do you enjoy doing? Is it a sport? Is it rowing? Is it running? Is it jumping rope? Is it weightlifting? Start with something that you can get consistent with on a daily basis. You will start to expand and try some of these other things, but you have to start with something that you seriously enjoy. If you could do something to track your fitness goals too. Now, again, it could be shooting for certain goals, certain objective measurements. Maybe it's a sprint time. Maybe it's a certain weight. As far as bench pressing or squatting a certain weight, or jumping a certain number of inches off the ground, or beating a certain time. Whatever that goal is, it really doesn't matter. What's the one that's relevant to you? The routine thing, I'm gonna have to hammer this home like as much as possible. Has to fit in your routine, especially on the days you work. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, I don't care if it's 15 minutes. It's got to be something that you consistently do all pretty much every day. And the first thing I'll say is do something today. Can you get something done today for 15, 20 minutes? Whatever it is, even if it's right now, it could be jumping jacks. It really doesn't matter. It could be dancing. It could be anything. Just getting started. Again, if you need to hire a trainer to figure it out, you can help identify what your strengths and weaknesses are. You can find a workout buddy to keep you accountable. Someone who can keep you accountable. That's going to be really helpful. And then, like I said, weight training is, in my opinion, non-negotiable. Again, it can be body weight. I haven't lifted really weights in years, but body weight exercises are done every single day, even if it's lifting stuff around the house, whatever it is, it can do it. Ideally, you want to get to a point where you're incorporating all four of those pillars, right? Getting the proper timing. We're going to talk about that in a second. Flexibility, mobility, strength training, aerobic training every single week. Got to let it happen. And a good place to start, if you're really just getting started, get to some place where you can do 20 minutes a day for 3 days a week. But you want to build up where you can get to up to an hour of exercise 5 to 6 days a week. And you could switch it up. You're not doing the same thing 5 or 6 days a week. One day could be yoga, one day could be Pilates, 2 days could be strength training, one day could be a run. One day could be a crew if you're into that, or playing basketball if you're into that, or soccer, or whatever. The more dynamic, the more variety that you throw in, actually, the more resilient your body is going to become. So the more that you do that, the more that you build in variety, the more you don't get stuck in a rut, going to be really important. And that's like an easy example way that you can get all four pillars in. A day or two of yoga, a day or two of more aerobic style training. You could do a day or two of HIIT style training if you're into high intensity interval training. As long as you're getting some sort of strength into that. And ideally, I would say if I had to, like, get at least 2 to 3 days of strength training in a week. And again, that can be incorporated in a variety of different things: crew, climbing, weightlifting, resistance bands, calisthenics. You can do body weight exercises that will count as strength training. Getting to be able to do a pull up, to push yourself off the floor, to hold a dead hang for at least 90 seconds. So, all these things are goals that we can work towards. And, start slow, you build over time. Like I said, it could be as simple as 20 minutes, three times a week, and just build up to that. But make yourself the promise to just start getting into it and start being consistent. Like, you owe it to yourself. It's one of those things that is non-negotiable in every healing plan. And the sooner that you realize that you're doing it to better yourself and better your life and better serve other people, the more that you're going to realize that it's something that just cannot be missed. So I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys next week at some point. I'll be going away, so I might be a week off after that. The library or membership, whatever you want to call it, will be dropping in March at some point. I don't have a name for it yet. I'm still trying to iron out the kinks and make sure what works. So I hope you're excited for that. If you haven't checked out Nature's Kitchen and Cabinet, you want to talk about herbs, you want to talk about getting in the kitchen, all that information's there. So I hope this was helpful. I'll save this here on YouTube. I'll save this on IG. I will see you guys later. Have a lovely weekend. Much love. Bye. All right.